How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm all right. It's Sunday.
Sunday.
Been drinking a lot. Should probably stop that. But
As a parent, I suppose I shouldn't say good for you. I wish I could do that.
no, that would make you one of the cool parents, which I don't know if you are. I'm just kidding.
I would rather be thought of as strict, appropriately strict.
Right.
All right, everyone. Hi, Eric. So today we are going to talk about a movie that has actually been made sometime in the last couple of years. Yay, exciting. Although I really kind of love talking to you about the rewatches too, because the last two episodes we talked about the movies that we love so much. And I was listening to the podcast about Kung Fu Panda 2. And I will say that one of the things that's really interesting or gratifying about those episodes is that I actually think that you persuade me to think more of Kung Fu Panda 2 than I was originally disposed to. And I think that that's an interesting lesson in persuasion. I do a lot of work in persuasion. I work in communications for nonprofit causes in the social sector, and so all we think about all the time we think about what will persuade people. Like we think about what messages, what ideas will persuade people. So maybe it's just our relationship and the fact that we're mother and son, and I love you dearly. But I actually came away. I think I moved. I didn't come away thinking I disliked that movie, and now I like it. I thought I came to a neutral place about that movie. I thought, it was better than I thought it was, actually, because of the arguments he made. So I just want to say.
And that's lovely, and I appreciate that. And for me, you give me you're in a different age group. You give me a different perspective on all the things I watch.
Different age group. That's a very tactful way to
also,
I'm so much older than
just
you.
saying. I mean, just like literally. But also, I was obviously very willing to sort of look over the whitewashing stuff, but you are a voice that, makes me think, okay, maybe I should think about that a bit more and give it a bit more thought, which is great.
Anyway, let's talk today about Joyride, which I watched last week. So Joyride is a comedy. It was directed by Adele Lim, who also co-wrote the screenplay. And Adele Lim, I think she probably became more known around the time of Crazy Rich Asians. So she was one of the writers on Crazy Rich Asians. And actually, there's a bit of a story behind there because I don't know if anyone's noticed, but there has not been a sequel in development for Crazy Rich Asians. So it was such a popular movie. It got a lot of attention. People were so happy, to see a sort of a mainstream Asian American romantic comedy. And Adele Lim apparently walked away from the negotiations after the first movie came out because she was not getting pay parity as a female. So that's kind of a bummer.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a bit of a. I mean, I don't think the story is really out there, but it is known that she was not part of the deal. And I think that what happened was her not being part of the walking away from negotiations. I think it might have ended up torpedoing the whole thing. So anyway, so Adele Lim, this is the first movie that you can really say that it's her first big solo effort, and it tells a story of three Asian women, one Asian person who identifies as non-binary, I believe, and her character's name is Deadeye, and I think the actress also identifies as non-binary. So I should probably say actor. Sabrina Wu plays Deadeye. So these four, I'm going to say women just for convenience sake. But these four friends.
Is Deadeye's character not a woman?
Deadeye's character, I believe. I think that it's being strongly suggested that Deadeye identifies as non-binary. So. I think she is. I think everybody's treating her as a woman because of the cultural norms. I think everybody's treating her as a woman, but I think that it's being conveyed quite strongly, and also by the actor who plays her, Sabrina Wu, that she is that she is supposed to she's working towards a non-binary identity. That's my guess. I could just be making all that up, but
Mm,
that's what I'm guessing. But
yeah.
it's one of the themes of the movie. These four friends are in China together, because of Audrey's, the main character. It's she's going there for work, and she brings along her friend Lolo as translator, and then she ends up meeting her best friend from college, who's Kat, who's a famous actress, and they all end up in some ways. It's one of those crazy road trip comedies. And then it's also about finding your own identity, particularly for Audrey, who's played by Ashley Park. But there's a whole subplot involving Audrey finding her birth mother, who gave her up for adoption. So she was raised by white parents in the United States. Okay, so that's the synopsis. It's a comedy. I did think it was quite funny in parts. I did laugh out loud. So I wanted to start this conversation today because I had some really interesting, very positive feelings about the movie, and then also some questions about the movie. But I wanted to start with the question of representation, because this is one of those movies that was held up as being a great example of representation. And I wanted to talk about the difference between representation and identity. So, when I say representation, I mean there are lots of people. I now follow a lot of Asian, and Asian American content creators online, and they were so excited about this movie because they were like, "This is a movie that was written and directed by Asian people that showed Asian people in a really authentic way." Like it showed them really being their authentic selves, and we're so happy and thrilled to see people who look like us. That's the issue. Like we're so happy to see, ourselves in all these different complex ways being represented on screen. And I really get that. Like I really, really get that. But at the same time, I was sort of left with this question of whether or not I identified with any of these characters. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about my own journey to understanding the Korean part of my identity. It really made me think about that. So I actually wanted to start by asking you, Eric, um, given the fact that I've been on such a journey figuring out sort of what parts of me sort of feel Korean versus what don't feel Korean, I can only imagine. And it's been such a diluted experience for me because I was born here in America and my parents raised me in such an assimilated way, not speaking the Korean language because they really just wanted me to fit into this, society that was utterly foreign for them. So I wanted to ask you, since you're only half Korean, and since you've probably been raised with even more multicultural,
Only.
with more multicultural influences than me, even you didn't even have like the sort of concentrated dose of Koreanness. Do you feel Korean? Like, were there things about this movie and the Asian American representation that really spoke to you, or were you like, no, I feel like I'm watching a different culture than mine?
Um, I didn't with any films that depict Asian characters or especially with Korean characters when they talk about Koreanness,
Yeah.
or aspects of Korean culture. I do feel like I relate because I feel like I from you and from grandma and grandpa and our family, I feel like I actually get a lot of what they reference. I found myself in past lives especially being like, oh, I totally get what she means by
Really?
when she says like, oh, he's yeah, totally. So I identify with it a lot. Well, not to the extent like that it's my personal experience, but I just know kind of I'm in the vicinity, so I know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's interesting that you bring up the fact that it had you questioning your identity a lot because I think you said the same thing for when Everything Everywhere came out.
Yes.
Because and
I was thinking about that a
coincidentally,
lot.
they have Stephanie. Yeah, they both have Stephanie too, who's really great.
Yeah, she's a
in
great
both
actress.
movies.
Yes.
For both movies, I watched, and I mean, especially since they were about women. I obviously didn't. It wasn't like, oh, this is my experience or whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, they both spoke to me a lot. Not just in terms of being good as examples of representation,
Mm-hmm.
but also because the stories were really great. And because the stories were great, I only focused on, you know, the the character arcs and how amazing it was for these characters to have to go through this journey.
Yeah.
So and I feel like I can understand how when the stories or the themes are so close to your personal life
Yeah.
that and your personal experience that it kind of dilutes um how you take it in.
Yeah.
But you know, for me, I was just an outsider that was really happy for these characters that they came to these like realizations and connections and stuff.
Oh, I'm totally struck by this phrase that you just used. Number one, what you just said really, I found very thoughtful. And then the other thing I want to say is that I'm really struck by this phrase that you use, which might distinguish the difference between the struggle I feel when I'm watching Everything Everywhere All at Once or Joyride. Um, it's the phrase that you said, I'm in the vicinity, so it feels familiar, but I'm not so close to it that it feels painful or confusing in any way. And so that to me is a really great distinction, you know? Like sometimes I wish I was in the vicinity more than because sometimes I feel like I'm supposed to feel closer to it than I do, you know? Like I feel like, oh, I'm supposed to be identifying with this much more than I am, but I'm not, you know? And it reminds me of this very puzzling experience that I had in college. I was taking, you know, what's the equivalent, I think, of cultural criticism in film schools like yours. But back at Brown, it was called Modern Culture and Media, which was about critical theory. It was about, you know, cinema and different types of socio-political influences on text and books and art and blah, blah, blah. But then I remember my professor advising me on my thesis said, I really would love to see you become like this writer. I want to see you become a writer writing about your experiences as a woman of color, you know, particularly as a woman, like writing about your gender identity and writing about your identity as a person of color. And I literally had this moment of walking away from that meeting and going, I don't know how I feel about any of that. Like, I don't know how I feel about being a woman. I don't know. I didn't have any perspective on it, you know? And so I was like, am I supposed to think certain things as a woman or as a woman of color? Like, am I supposed to be recognizing
Right.
more misogyny or sexism, or am I supposed to be, you know, recognizing more like racial or ethnic identity? So it took me, I'd say 20, 30 years to even get to the point of understanding what that might mean. And I think that that's because identity identity is one thing, and then representation is another thing. So representation on screen in a movie like, you know, Joyride, some things really, really rang true to me, and some things were just like, ugh, that's not me at all, you know. So and that's okay. That's fine. They took a swing at it. They tried to represent different types of people, and sometimes it really worked, and sometimes it did not. So anyway. I love that phrase. I wish I wish I knew that I wish I knew I was in the vicinity like you do.
I feel like I've had the benefit now where I've had a very supportive community. I've always had a very supportive community, and I've had the benefit of learning a lot just about race, about identity, about what matters in terms of representation. So having knowledge of all that when it comes together in a movie and just portrays something that's meaningful, or at least meaningful to somebody that's not me,
Yeah.
then I think I could really relate and resonate with something like that. So
Yeah.
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 But I totally see what you're saying.
So, talking about the things that I did identify with and the things I didn't identify with, I did want to talk about one of the things I did not identify with, just because it poses a very interesting question for me and it's about the vulgarity of the comedy, you know, how sort of bawdy and explicit the comedy was. And I will just say that Dad watched the movie with me, and Dad was kind of squicked out by parts of it. He was squicked out. And so at the end, he kept on saying, "Oh, wow, oh, geez," then he got worried and defensive. About the fact that he was reacting. He was like, "It's not like I'm being a prude or anything like that." Or it's not like I think it's okay for white guys to be vulgar and that Asian women cannot. You know what I mean? Like, so he was in this defensive mode. So he was basically making the point that
Dad is in a very interesting place with this movie.
Oh, did you talk to him about it?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm just in general as a person.
So, but it did lead me to think a lot about the point of the vulgarity in the movie, and I wanted to articulate that a little bit. Because one of the producers of the movie was Seth Rogen. And I really actually admire the fact that he is an executive producer, because it's clear that he's there to give a lift up, right? Like, Seth Rogen is somebody who broke into
ally.
Yes, exactly. He's being an ally in this circumstances because he was given a leg up as a white dude. He definitely came up through the Judd Apatow school of comedy, and the Judd Apatow, just like the Farrelly brothers, they just got really well known for their movies were incredibly funny, and they always had one or two moments that were over the top, insanely vulgar, and so, like, a shot that you could not believe that they went there, So with the Farrelly brothers, and There's Something About Mary, there is a scene in which Ben Stiller is going to the prom with Cameron Diaz, and he gets his junk caught in his zipper fly. And they actually they have a shot of that. They have a shot of what that looks like when his junk is all cut and he has to be taken to the hospital. And so you cannot believe that they did that shot. And then in Knocked Up, which starred Seth Rogen, Judd Apatow comedy, they actually had a scene in which Katherine Heigl is giving birth, and then one of Seth Rogen's friends looks in on the scene, and he accidentally sees the baby's head crowning right out of her vagina. So they actually show that.
That's crazy.
Yes, I know. So these are moments of totally over the top comedy, where if you've seen these comedies all in a row, then it obviously prepares you for Joyride when you actually get a shot of her devil tattoo and you have all the sort of explicit sexual gestures and so it was interesting. I completely got the point of what they were trying to do. I'll state it right here and tell me if you agree with me, Eric. I think that they're trying to say this is okay. We want to show Asian American characters and all of their complexity. So it's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just the domain of white guys to be funny and vulgar. It means that, like, every character can be represented in engaging in all kinds of different types of behaviors. That was my theory about why the vulgarity was sort of the point. Do you have a opinion about that? Other than it's just funny?
No, I just thought it was well-written comedy. Yeah, it's just funny. And the whole point of showing Asian characters doing this stuff is that this is just crazy shit, for a bunch of characters to do. They just happen to be Asian. But also, going on this trip and all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah, but I just thought it was funny. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, you don't think
which is funny because I usually don't like.
You don't have an opinion on the vulgarity piece? Like, you don't even think of it as vulgarity, do you?
I mean, it's funny because I think normally I would be, like, put off by that sort of thing. I watched, just in general, the comedies this year have been really great. And another comedy I saw was No Hard Feelings with Jennifer Lawrence.
Yes.
And that's all about just, trying to have sex with this 19-year-old or something.
Yeah.
Or is he 21? I don't know. But yeah, that was also raunchy and weird. And as much as I thought it was funny, like some of the things I was like, this is just weird, and I don't think it's my type of thing.
Right.
But for Joyride, I don't know why, but I think it was just so ridiculous and so over the top that I thought it was just hilarious. I think the probably the first instance where I was like, this is just really funny was when Stephanie Hsu's character was in
Cat.
the gym
you
with
can call
that
her
guy
Cat.
Yeah, Cat was with that guy in the gym, and it was so I was laughing out loud in the theater. It was with like the basketball, I think,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. They
And
were
she
all
was
having
doing
sex
different
in one way or
workouts.
another.
It
Yes.
was
You know, Audrey was involved in a 2-on-1, and she was involved in a threesome. And Deadeye was singing passionate K-pop karaoke, and then Kat was in the gym,
yeah.
like yes, with a Theragun actually.
I guess something that really worked for those things was that um, there was it was like because of there was obvious like repression,
Oh,
and the fact
interesting.
that they were rebelling against that
Yes.
was probably the thing that made that work for me because um, this is obviously so opposite of whatever their goal was or whatever
Yeah.
they thought their life was gonna go.
Yeah.
But by the fact that that was happening was so ridiculous, and it actually ended up kind of showing more about themselves or getting them to see more about who they are than they maybe would have otherwise.
Oh, that's a really great point, Eric. That's a really so that makes me see that makes me understand the I'm going to call it raunchiness instead of vulgarity. That makes me understand the point of it better in retrospect. The similarity, by the way, I would say is that I often say this about Lizzo, who I follow Lizzo on Instagram, and she is always, always, always twerking in her Instagram videos, like her reels. She's always pointing her butt at the camera, super close up, and twerking, and that's all the camera. And that's the main point of all the reels that she posts is that she and her friends are always twerking with their asses pointed at the camera, and there's a part of me that has this reaction like I don't need to see that. That's exactly what Dad was sort of feeling about this movie. Like I don't know, I don't need to see that. But at the same time, I understand why Lizzo is doing it because she's fighting back against society telling her that she shouldn't be wearing bikinis and she shouldn't be doing that and she shouldn't be acting sexual. You know what I mean? Like she's fighting against society's perceptions about what larger size women should do or how they should behave or how they should act. You know, she's trying to bust down boundaries. So even though I don't need to see it, I kind of understand the point of it, you know? And I think that is probably the point, what you said about repression, is that these Asian women, certainly Asian women, are stereotyped and put into these boxes where they're supposed to be these demure little flowers. And instead, this movie shows them incredibly raunchy and, you know what I mean? Like just very sexual and very, yes. Anyway.
Your analogy to Lizzo would be a tad bit stronger
Yes.
had she not
Harassed.
recently come out with that shit. Yeah, but
I know.
no, I totally see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Also, she's only she hasn't really been nothing's been proven, so I feel like she deserves the benefit of the doubt. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
okay.
know. I know she's been judged in the court.
I don't know.
In the court.
I don't think celebrities deserve the benefit of the doubt.
All right. All right.
Usually.
Well, let's get then to the obvious part. What did you like about the movie? You said you liked the character development. You said that you liked the writing.
Yes. Right. Well, I said that comedies this year have been great.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like the level of comedy and the jokes and stuff, most of them are on the same level. Where I go in and I don't really have the highest expectations, but they have enough really funny moments that grab me. But I think what set this one apart from the other comedies I've seen is the how it wraps itself up. Because I didn't expect for the end to actually be as raw and emotionally connecting as it was.
Same.
Because I ended up sobbing. At the
I
end,
was
like,
tearing up too.
Daniel Day Kim. Yes. Daniel Day Kim comes with his soft, beautiful, low voice, and he's like, I have something to show you. And then, they sit down and then they watch the video that was given. I don't remember any of their names, but
It was given to Audrey.
and that was just such a Audrey. Yes, it was such a beautiful moment, and actually, it was funny because the movie started off with the scene from when they were kids, and when they were in school and stuff like that. That actually had me emotional too. I was
Same.
somehow so impacted. Yeah, I was so impacted by like showing their friendship and what that meant to them in the beginning, and when they stood up for each other and stuff. Um, and then when they went to uh, when they were adults, I felt like they were sort of trying to. It was just sort of like playing setups, and some of the comedy was a little like uh, not as good because it hadn't escalated yet. Because it was just normal day to day stuff,
Right.
and sometimes that involves them saying sort of like cringe, like trendy sort of things, like uh, I think I forgot, but it just sounds like Gen Z speak sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but once they actually got the story going, they got all the people together. It just built. It just get one after another. Like some other crazy thing would happen, or some hilarious element would be added to the story. But my favorite character was definitely Kat because of her, relationship with her fiance,
Yeah.
the Christian guy.
Yeah.
Because that relationship was so funny because it was so obvious, like what she was going for, and how hard it was for her to, you know, try and uh, get this life that she always wanted. But and then towards the end, like it was such a great resolution to that. Like he was like, I've always wanted to do that stuff, but it's just I didn't know if I yeah, it was so funny. Um, so yeah, just the story. I think if it can wrap itself up in the end in a way that's super satisfying, then I think it's a solid movie in my book.
Yeah. I think I felt exactly the same way you did. And then, although I will say that the middle parts felt really flabby to me. Like it just felt like it was sagging at times in the setup part. Um, and so I was really moved by that opening sequence. I laughed out loud when they threatened that little boy who said those racist things. And I literally had this moment where like, yeah, yeah, like yeah, fuck him up. Anyway,
Yeah, me too.
and so I too felt that established their friendship so deeply, and really thought, and I was also so unbearably moved by the fact that they had each other in primarily like a white upbringing, that they had each other, and how important it is for to have those to have people who look like you and understand what you're going through because of the way that you look, and the other thing that I thought was funny at the beginning of the movie was the contrast between the white parents and the Asian parents. That they were sort of like they were all like hugging each other and doing all these silly little games, and then Lola was like, yeah, white people, this is what they do. This is very, very funny. And so I thought that contrast in parenting styles felt very, very real. And then as the movie went through China and went through the device, I thought that the plot devices seemed really bizarre and out of nowhere. So I think that, by the way, that shows a difference between being able to come up with a really good premise for a comedy, for a movie, versus plot, like premise versus plot. So I think that the premise of the movie is great. It's as old as time, is to have a buddy road trip movie, and a bonding movie. And it's great that every race ethnicity gets their own sort of buddy road trip movie, adventure type movie. So I think the premise was really great. I think the premise of her finding out her identity and discovering identity was really solid. It's just that the plot was lurching from one step to the next, and it felt really, it felt like it felt like the writers were in the room going, we need a reason for her to go and into the countryside and visit, you know what I mean, like we need, and so like all of a sudden you go from her in this club, with that partner where she's trying to land the deal, you go from that to them suddenly like riding a little moped in the Chinese countryside, and even though that's supposed to be funny, it wasn't done as well as I think it either should have been heightened or it should have been done more smoothly, but the transitions didn't feel smooth at that point.
Sometimes it just didn't feel like it was a reason for, things were happening for a reason in the story. It was just like a
Yes.
sort of mechanism to shift, just get to the next
That's
thing.
right. And you can feel the strain of the writers. Yeah, you can feel the strain of the writers. Like, we need to figure out how to get them to their, we need to get her exposed to Lola. You know what I mean? Like, you need to get them exposed to Lola's grandma or her family. How are we going to get them there? Oh, let's make it near the adoption agency. Like, you're just like, what?
Right. That was not a huge enough detracting point for it to drag down my experience of the movie, because as much as I could recognize that, I was more like in love with the other elements of the movie, that it just kept me hooked, and the jokes were consistently pretty good.
Yeah, they were funny.
I just found myself laughing most of the time.
Yeah, I thought that you said that you liked Stephanie Sue's performance the best. I liked Ashley Park's performance the best as Audrey. I thought she did a really, really. She didn't go over the top in portraying how driven she was to succeed. Like, she showed like how driven and focused she was, but she had a really light touch with showing how scared she was about discovering more about her identity, and part of that was for really valid reasons, because she had such loving parents, like loving adoptive parents, but part of that was that she was scared what she would find, so I thought her performance was great. And then towards the end, when she hears that message from her birth mother. So all along in the movie, I was thinking, nobody's going to believe that she's Chinese. Like, why? And I kept on saying, why did they get a Korean actress to play a Chinese character? And then it actually was realized through the story. And I was like, okay. So then.
Wow.
Yeah. So towards the end. And then I thought, as soon as they discovered that she was in actual fact Korean by ethnicity, then there was that scene where Lola's family just didn't seem that interested in her anymore. Like, they didn't seem, they all like kind of turned their backs on her. And I thought that felt really true, because there's a lot of antipathy between different Asian groups. They always, anyone who's not Asian always thinks of us as one big conglomerate, but in actual fact there's like very real differences between, not only between like different types of Asians, but also in how we feel about each other too. But then that last sequence, where she finds out about her mother, number one, Dad and I let out a startled laugh when Danny appeared on screen. So we were like,
yeah, me too. I was
like, what?
I was in the theater, and I was alone. I was alone in the theater, and I was like, "Oh wait, what? He's in this movie?
I know, he's in this movie."
This came out of nowhere.
Yes, came out of nowhere. I should say for our viewers, I'm not trading on his fame, but I should just say that Daniel Dae Kim is the son of very close friends of my parents. So I knew him growing up. There were times when all the different families in that area would get together, and all the kids would play tennis and swim in each other's pools. And so I have known Danny since he was, since we were in elementary school. And so, yeah,
we would have gotten him on the podcast, but to get the one male actor guy in the ensemble cast of women, I don't think that would really work. But I was curious to know what his experience on the movie was like.
Well, he's friends with Adele Lim, and he actually recommended Ashley Park for the role of Audrey. But I also thought that he did a good job in his role towards the end. And then by that point, how I wear my glasses to watch movies. By that point, like, I literally, like, my glasses were sliding down my nose because I was crying, and I was wiping. I didn't expect to cry in this movie at all, and so I was reaching down in my shirt and crying. So I thought that I thought that the movie was beautifully wrapped up, and overall, I think I ended up liking the movie very, very much. The over the top sequences, like flashing the devil tattoo. I guess so. I mean, it was funny in its own way, but sometimes it just didn't work for me. So, yeah, that's
what
how
was funnier for me was when her fiance ran away and ran towards the door, because he had the silliest run I've ever seen, where he's going. So funny. Yeah, he was definitely one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, and then I also
also another thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry, one more thing I want to say is I really love that they depicted Asian men in this. They just had a bunch of hot Asian men in this movie. Like, I feel like I don't ever see Asian men being portrayed in that way.
True.
And I think let's have more of that. Hey, I like women, but let's have more hot Asian men in movies.
I agree.
Just saying.
I agree.
I think it helps everybody.
Yes, that pushes.
It helps me. No.
I actually think that's I think that's an excellent point, because I think that a large part of this movie, well, actually, I'm going to say this overall, it comes back to the raunchiness too, but there's this whole history of Asian men that, not being portrayed as desirable romantic targets, and Crazy Rich Asians was considered to be groundbreaking with that, and that for the first time you had like these really incredibly hot Asian men who were sex symbols in their own right. And so they always say this about John Cho, but they say that John Cho is always overlooked for the leading man parts because he's not quote unquote conventional like Brad Pitt is or whatever. Like he's not like a white guy's idea of sexiness, I guess. So Dev Patel is another example, that's brought up as somebody who hasn't gotten the same types of chances as would be given a white like leading man actor, quote unquote. And so I think that you're right. Asian men in this movie were really, really hot. Very, very hot overall. I actually thought that I was going to ask you, given that you prepare the thumbnails for each episode, I was going to ask you if you could Photoshop me into the thumbnail that's in the Prime Video thumbnail. Do you know which one I mean? So it's that tall actor dude.
No, but like that would be hilarious.
I know. Well, it's the tall actor dude like standing there, and then Kat, played by Stephanie Hsu, is like cuddling up to him, looking at him adoringly. So I thought it would be really funny if you could Photoshop me like looking at that guy adoring him.
My Photoshop skills are not that good, but you know what? I'll try and figure something out.
Yeah. So anyway, I think of this movie overall, I feel really good about this movie, about where it sits in the canon, like where it sits in the canon of Asian American cinema. And that sort of leads me to the final thing I wanted to talk about today, which is how I do think that things I don't think that I realized how much things were breaking open with Parasite, but I do feel like Parasite winning the Best Picture Oscar, I feel like that there's like a before and after to that moment, So I mean, but because well before Parasite, you had Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was really considered to be, groundbreaking in so many ways. And it was directed by Ang Lee. And Ang Lee had such a storied career. He did Brokeback Mountain. He did The Ice Storm. He did such great movies. Although Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I think was his first quote unquote Asian subjects, like Asian American subjects. And so I feel like with Parasite and with Bong Joon-ho and then with the advent of streaming on Netflix, where you have Squid Game and all the K-drama, I feel like we're at a different place now. I mean, I feel like we're at a different place now with Asian American cinema, and I feel that way about literature too. Like there's an explosion. Do you feel like it's a different place? And I know you're not as old as I am, but just asking you that question.
No, that's really great that you mentioned Parasite winning the Oscar, because I could see how that's sort of an entry point for a lot of people with Asian American cinema.
Yeah.
It does. My immediate reaction though is like, oh my God, like that's so annoying that it has to be that big or like that sort of aesthetic to be able to catch people's attention.
Yes.
That sort of stuff, but it's kind of true. And, admittedly, I can't think of many examples before, that. But it is great. And I think that's it just opens people up to better movies and good movies overall. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's great. And I think any representation, like this is good.
Yeah, I mean,
so we should have more of it.
I think we're in a different place, but I still don't think we're at the point of. I don't think that we're yet at the point where, what your point about Parasite having to be that good and having to get that level of recognition in order to break down the gatekeeping, so to speak. I think that that's a really important point, because I don't think we're yet at the point where Asian American directors are not yet allowed to make bad movies, so to speak, and they're not really allowed to fail in the same way that white white led movies, white subject movies are allowed to quote unquote fail. You know what I mean? And so I don't think that there's as much of a margin for error, or there's as much of a margin for mistakes as there is for Asian American movies. And so, for example, women led movies are always considered to be, the stakes are always so much higher. And that is actually one of my worries about Joyride. I didn't look up how it did at the box office before today's episode, but it did kind of get buried. Like it got buried, it got caught up, and it was not,
Yeah.
it was not out in the theaters very long. It was not it was not given a lot of press. And then the summer, it's one of those movies, by the way, that might have developed legs in the theater. It might have gotten more word of mouth, like, hey, people, you should go see this. You should go see this funny movie as a change. But number one, Barbie and Oppenheimer swamped everything else at the box office. And then number two, everything, they really did. Like those two movies coming out the way that they did. And I honest to God, I kind of think that I think that Joyride is not as high concept as Barbie, but quality wise, I actually think that they are on the same playing field. Quality wise, production value, production values, and star power. Barbie is like way up here. In terms of like A-list actors and high concept production design. But in terms of quality of script and quality of like taking on the themes and concept, I think that they're on the same playing field. But Barbie and Oppenheimer together,
I didn't cry at Barbie.
Yes, exactly. I didn't cry at Barbie either. So I think that Joyride got lost in the shuffle. And then after Barbie and Oppenheimer, it was just a couple weeks, and then boom, the strikes happened. And all movies that are coming out now are just, how can I say this? There are many people who are not going to see the movies that are coming out in the next 6 months because of a lack of they're not keeping track. So for example, I've been keeping an eye out on the movies that debuted at the film festivals like Venice and Toronto and Telluride, and some of the movies that are coming out of those festivals have tremendous word of mouth, like really, really worth seeing. But in this current phase that we're in, a lot of movies are going to get buried. And so I really, really want more movies like Joyride to be made. And I'm worried that they will not be made because they didn't make very much money at the box office and because they didn't generate that type of buzz that Barbie did. So I don't think we need a million more shitty movies, that are shitty imitations of Barbie. Just for the record, I didn't think that Barbie was a bad movie, but I don't think that we need like a million imitators of Barbie. But I do think I would totally sign up to watch a lot more comedies like Joyride any day,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And something
I wanted to have its chance.
I just keep thinking. Yes, absolutely. I just even while you were talking, I just remembered another Asian directed movie by Lulu Wang, The Farewell, which I haven't seen since it came out.
Yes.
And I think that deserves a rewatch because I remember that being like really profound. But then I also saw Shortcomings from Randall Park, which was right after, and also has Sherry Cola. But I didn't like that one.
Yeah.
It was about a dipshit, it was about a dipshit, and I just hated the main character. But
you had a choice.
It was definitely funny, like, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was also a really small movie, super small. But there were good jokes in there, and it was not unimportant to the to Asian American movies. I'm glad Randall Park got a directorial debut, and a lot of people seem to actually like that movie, but I didn't like it personally. But Sherry Cola, I was in both movies, and I think she should have more roles.
Yeah.
I think she has a presence that is very unique, especially for somebody who's an Asian American actress. And I think she needs to keep going because I actually really like what she has to offer. In Shortcomings, she was just kind of like, it was a little too real, maybe, in terms of just being that friend that's like sort of an asshole, but not really. I think she needs better written scripts. but I really like. I thought she was great. I'd never heard of her before these two
Yeah,
movies,
me neither.
and I thought she was really great, and she offered a lot.
Yeah, I thought she was great too. That actually reminds me of something else that I really, really loved about this movie that I'm glad you reminded me about this. None of the four characters, the four friends, fit the this the stereotypical definition of Asian beauty. I fucking love
Mm.
that because that is one
Yeah.
area that I so strongly identified with because all my life I was raised with the expectations that I had to be like stick thin and white as can be, like so pale, so skinny with like long spindly legs, and like have these big eyes. All the Korean women get their eyes done with the eyelid surgery to get their eyes like to look big and round like anime characters. And so all my life I've been living with these these norms of beauty to the point where I just really felt so like this now gets us right back to representation. And so all of the women looked so different from each other. So even though they all had their own style and their own way of dressing and looking, Sherry Cola is a great example of that. I think she's cute as a button. Loved her presence on screen. Loved the fact that she was just kind of loud and in charge, you know what I mean, and really honest and outspoken. But you would never describe her as fitting into that conventional sort of delicate little Asian flower like mode at all. So
Right.
I loved that about this casting, and I would love to see more movies like this. I would love to see more movies like this rather than all the Barbie imitations that are coming out. And there are going to be a ton of imitations coming out. Like people are saying that all people can see about the
Yeah.
Barbie success is that it made over $1 billion.
Separate from Asian representation is also, female representation. A very female dominant cast and crew. And I just saw Bottoms a few days ago, and that was also the same. And I think more female directed written movies should be released because they're very funny.
Oh, wait, was
Just as
Bottoms
a little
is
side
Bottoms
note.
the one about the girls who start a fight club in their high school?
Yeah.
And it was funny? I want to see that.
It was really funny. And it I was surprised at how unserious it took itself. So maybe if you wanted to watch that, we could do that another day. But yeah, that it was funny. It was, and I enjoyed myself.
All right. Well, next movie, let's figure out what we do for our next episode. But I'm glad that we chose this one. I actually feel like it's a really great progression from our conversation about Kung Fu Panda 2. I think that one has a sort of I just feel like one has a kind of purity about it when it comes to a childhood. You know what I mean? Like the movie that you first saw and that you first remember seeing in the theater. But then we have our conversation,
Yeah,
our bridging conversation about Asian representation and whitewashing to like this conversation about representation, and what it really looks like in identity. So it's been great.
yeah,
And I enjoyed the movie
yeah. I agree.
overall. All right. So I think
Me
that's
too.
it. I'll see you next time. Same bat time, same bat place.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. And we'll catch you in a couple weeks.